Good day everyone, my name is Anjali, Binometric A209650. With rapid urbanization, human waste has increased dramatically. Today, there are around 1.3 million smokers consuming nearly 5 trillion cigarettes every year. As a result, cigarette butts have become one of the most abundant forms of urban waste. Most of us think that cigarette butts are pollution, but have you ever wondered whether some animal actually make use of this human waste? This brings us to our study species, the Eurasian beauty. Today, I would like to present a study entitled Urban Beauty Nest and Cigarette Butts, Accidental Litter or Adaptive Behavior. To understand why birds may use cigarette butts, we need to look at their natural behavior. Birds naturally protect their nest by eating aromatic plants. This behavior is known as the nest fumigation because these plants can release the volatile compound that help to repair the enteroparasite, such like fleas and mice. Interestingly, cigarette butts also contain nicotine, which is well known as an insecticide and repellent. Previous study has shown that house finches use cigarette butts to reduce the enteroparasite abundance, and also the beauties have been observed building nests in ashtray bins. So, what is the relationship between the cigarette butts and the beauty nest? The study has two objectives. The first is to understanding how urban birds interact with anthropogenic material in their environments. Second, to determine how this interaction may influence their health and fitness. Start from study site, which are constructed in urban parklands and forest habitat. Second, followed by the field and experimental procedure, measurement, and last is to undergo statistical analysis. I will focus primarily on explaining the experimental design and the measurement, as they are essential to understanding the study. A total of 23 nests were randomly divided into 3 groups. The control group remains as natural nests and receives 2 unsmoked cigarette filters or added on day 5 and day 10. This is for controlling the physical presence of filter. Treatment 1 is natural nest which receive 2 smoked cigarette filters also on day 5 and day 10. Treatment 2 had the entire natural nest replaced by a sterile artificial nest which is constructed from dry moss and 100% of cotton wood. Besides, the moss has been dried for 24 hours at 25 degrees Celsius to remove the arthropods. This device is allow the researchers to distinguish between the effects of cigarette-derived chemical and the effect of computer sanitation. To evaluate the effect, researchers have measured 4 physiological indicators. The first is hemoglobin, it is to measure the oxygen carry capacity and as an anemia indicator. The second one is hematocrit as a proportion of red blood cells. Third one is glucose, which acts as a metabolic rate indicator, and Wingley will measure with a orthological ruler. To evaluate the nest healthy, after the nest fresh, the nest will collected for undergo poison and the stick to be examined for the four group of enteroparasites. There is space, blowfly, tick, and mice. Result of part A for the physiological condition. By comparing with the control group, nesting from both treatments show significantly higher value of hemoglobin and the hematocrit. These 2 values indicating the healthy blood physiology. This suggests that reducing parasite burden allows the nesting to allocate more resources to grow rather than recovering from the parasite stress. However, glucose levels show no significant difference among the treatments, indicating glucose is a less sensitive indicator of the parasite stress. For the willingness, it was significantly increased in the treatment 2, which is suggesting that growth benefits are most pronounced when parasites were virtually absent. Overall, this finding suggests that both treatments improve nesting healthy, although the artificial nest produce the stronger effects. Part B, 4 groups of enteroparasites were identified and finding the mice was the most abundant, following by the flies. When compared among the treatments, artificial nests show the lowest abundance of flies and blowflies, confirming that complete nest replacement is the most effective strategy for parasite control. For the secreted treated nest, there was a reduction of blowflies compared to the control group, but the effects were only marginally significant. Similarly, mice abundance showed only a marginal trend, and ticks abundance remained very low and showed no significant difference among the order of the treatment. So this suggests that cigarette butts provide limited anti-parasite effects where completed nest sanitation is more effective. Now, let us interpret these findings. First, cigarette butts may function as an urban substitute for aromatic plants. Both contain compounds with insect repellent properties, which could explain why birds incorporate them into their nests. However, cigarette butts appear to provide only partially effects of the fumigations, where artificial nests provide almost complete sanitation by removing the existing parasite community. Third, the improvement in nesting healthy is likely due to reduced parasite pressure rather than a direct benefit of nicotine itself. Higher hemoglobins and hematologic ulcers are consistent with previous nest sanitation study. At the same time, this behavior should be interpreted with caution. Although cigarette butts contain provide short-term anti-parasite benefit, but they also contain toxic substances such as nicotine, arsenic, and heavy metal. Previous studies has reported the general toxic effect in house finches, and long-term impact on beauty nesting still remain unknown. This demonstrated an interesting example of urban adaptations where birds appear to explore human-generated ways to solve a natural ecology problem. The study also highlighting that the cigarette butts may provide short-term anti-parasite benefit, but this frequency should be balanced against their potential toxic effect. In conclusion, this study showed that nesting from cigarette treated nests should improve physiological condition. This proved by the result of higher hemoglobin and hematologic, most likely due to reduce the parasite pressure. Second, cigarette butts appear to mimic the anti-parasite functions of aromatic plants, although they are less effective than compared with the completed nest sterilizations. Third, the behavior may represent an adaptive response to urban environments. Its long-term concentration remains uncertain because cigarette butts contain potentially harmful chemicals. Hence, to return to our original question, is this accidental lethal or adaptive behavior? There's the evidence suggests probably both because cigarette butts appear to provide some real benefit in terms of parasite reductions and improve nesting healthy, suggesting an adaptive behavior. However, the incompleted effects and potential toxicity mean that we cannot fully conclude this is an intentional behavior. Overall, the study suggests that wildlife may adapting to urban environment by exploring human-made material, but further research is needed to evaluate the long-term toxic effects of cigarette butt exposure. Besides, I would like to acknowledge the researchers and contributors who made this study, and these are the references used in this presentation. That's all for me. Thanks for your attention.